Hi everyone, my name is Grace Smith with the Wise News Network, and today we have a historical and poignant story for you. Have you ever wondered why Cherryville is called Cherryville? In a second, we'll hear from Sid Stroupe, who helped coordinate efforts to plant 100 cherry trees all around Cherryville. If you're interested in learning more, stick around and see why Cherryville is where life blossoms. Today I am here with Sid Stroupe, who coordinated the efforts to plant a bunch of cherry trees all over Cherryville. Sid, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Nice to see the sun out.
Absolutely. After that rain we had, I am so happy to see the sun. But the good news is that the rain was probably very good for the cherry trees.
Yes.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about these efforts of your coordination?
Yeah. So I'll say, the long and the short of the story is that several of us that grew up here in Cherryville, we visited in the most recent years, and we really were sort of disappointed that we hadn't seen as many cherry trees planted in Cherryville. So as a result of some of these informal discussions, a few of us got together with Mayor H.L. Beam, and we talked about, could we implement some kind of plan to have at least a first year planting to either replace trees that had died in prior years, and also supplement the current number of trees that are out there. Our major focus was the Cherryville City Cemetery.
Perfect. And can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Cherryville cherry trees? I've heard that it is quite interesting and integral to the town's and the city's formation.
Yeah. Well, first, I've got to give the credit to, there was a former mayor, Dub Robinson, and Mrs. Mary Frances Bagby Mooney, who had recorded and written the history of Cherryville in various forms. And there's always a big section on why was Cherryville named as it was. This community, or hamlet as they described it back in the mid-1800s, was very small, and there was one post office, and it was referred to with the government as White Pine. The White Pine Post Office. Well, as the railroad was being built from Charlotte, this was in the early 1860s, they got as far as Cherryville. This was in 1862, I believe. And at that time, there was a family, was Stephen, I think, and his wife, Mr. and Ms. Black, who lived somewhere along this stretch of the railroad, on the north side of the railroad as it came into town. Well, also, Cherryville was known for its old post road, which was a major north-south connecting wagon trail between Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Salisbury. Mrs. Black had a real affinity for cherries and cherry trees. And the story goes by both Mrs. Mooney and Mr. Robinson that she began planting the cherry seeds along both the railway as it came and along the old post road, which, as the old post road was in the uptown area, it was known as Cherry Lane. As I was explaining earlier, the lane eventually disappeared, but the railroad, of course, has stayed here. And over the years, since the 1860s, and at that time is when Cherryville formally took its name as Cherryville, there have been various efforts to try to maintain and preserve the cherry trees. So, as I said, we all got together and we said, what can we do to help move this along? It takes a lot of effort and a lot of manpower to move this thing, but we think that it's really going to be a great payoff for Cherryville in advertising, promotion, and attracting visitors in town each spring to see the trees.
It really seems like these cherry trees are such a symbol here in Cherryville. Can you explain why the cherry trees mean so much to the town?
I think, again, it's that this community has always prided itself on learning and forwarding the history forward. And, Cherryville, I like that about 10 years ago, they hired a company that really picked up on the Cherryville aspect. And, of course, then came this new branding of where life blossoms. Cherryville was always seen as a place to move in from the farms, And, we had a thriving business, community, commercial, mills, a trucking company, quite a large population here at one time. I think Cherryville represented a new beginning for a lot of people, just like the cherry tree, the cherry blossom.
That is such a beautiful image. And what went into coordinating and planning the efforts to get these trees planted?
Yeah, well, I'll say it did take quite a bit of time, but, I wasn't alone. I had a team. There was a team of us, a group of us. And I wanted to mention some of their names. Mr. Dan Blackwelder from San Francisco, his father was a former mayor here. And he and I discussed over the years how great it would be to see a revival of some cherry trees planted. Also, Mrs. Jane Blackwelder Holmesley was involved initially. My sister Carol Strap, also, she and I went around town last summer and did a survey. How many cherry trees are here? How many could be, probably replaced and updated? And where would be some really nice spots to add a few here and there along? We didn't want to take this on as a huge project, but we thought if we could just start with 100 trees, and that would be manageable for a small group of us. This was outside of the city government, although the city government did assist us and let us know that they would be happy for us to go and be on the grounds and help trim up some of the trees. I will also say the biggest factor always is money, funding. And we were looking for not the government or the city to pay for it, but we thought we could do a little campaign. And we were very, very lucky that there was one gentleman, a former native of Cherryville, Mr. John Talbert, that stepped up to Mr. stepped up and talked to Mr. Blackwelder, and through he and his wife's family foundation, they contributed the money for us to buy the trees. So we had the trees shipped directly from Tennessee, from McMinnville, Tennessee, and then we also engaged David Wise Landscaping from Lincolnton, so that once the trees arrived, we had someone that could go around, dig the holes, planting, mulch, water, and fertilize. So it took all of that, but again, it was a group effort. And Mr. Talbert offered that he would like to pay for this or fund this effort in honor of his wife, who is Judy Blackwelder Talbert. The both of them grew up here in Cherryville. And the short story there is that Judy and a group of women that she went to high school with used to get together over the years. They both were all graduates of Cherryville High School in 1957 and 58. And so through the years, the later years, the last 30 or 40 years, this group of women, there were about 6 or 7 of them, used to get together every spring and travel and get together and reminisce about their great times living in Cherryville. This is a big thing, to reminisce about how nice it was to live in Cherryville. So Mr. Talbert offered and said, I'd like to plant these in honor of my wife and her friends, which they affectionately called themselves the cherry blossoms. And they're all in their, early to mid 80s now, and they've lost a few of their friends. But I did want to just read their names because it's very important to him that they be remembered. So his wife is Judy Blackwelder Talbert. There's Brenda Boggs Strap of Cherryville, Lynette Holmesley Taylor, Gwyneth Sism Blackwelder, who's deceased, Ann Hunter Sharp Mace, who's deceased, Diana Long Dellinger, who's deceased, and then lastly, Helgi Karushka Schufert, who is a resident of Hickory. So we couldn't have done this without Mr. Talbert. It really was just a great thing that he did to save us some of that time. Now we can make our way out to other donors in the future. We'd like to continue this in the years to come, see if we couldn't get another 50 or 100 in the ground. And just, I've mentioned this before, but loosely we'd like to call Cherryville the Thomas Jefferson Memorial of the South. If you're familiar with that, that's where these types of cherry trees, the Kwanzans, are planted there around the tidal basin. And we see no reason why we couldn't have just as big a crowd and visitors to see our cherry trees around town.
Well, I think that is just a beautiful sentiment, and I really hope that Cherryville, North Carolina starts to be known as the Thomas Jefferson Memorial of the South. And it's really a great sentiment that not only these cherry trees are going to be a way for Cherryville citizens to remember their history, but also to remember the beautiful Cherryville cherry blossoms.
That's right.
And now, what do these cherry trees mean to you specifically?
Gosh. Well, I mean, I'll have to say it's sort of a reminder of days gone by. I grew up here in the 1960s and the 70s, and there was a lot of effort around cherry trees. And I remember the excitement in town when they would have a formal cherry tree month, right? And so as school kids, one of our projects would be we'd all draw cherry trees, and there was just a lot of excitement and a lot of energy around town during that month. And I know times change and people look for other ways. But to me personally, it was about moving, just trying to regain some of that enthusiasm for the cherry tree as it was back when I was a kid.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, this specific species of cherry tree does not necessarily produce cherries.
Right. That's interesting too. And this is, again, I'm reading history, but the original cherry trees were called the cherry red blossoms, the ones that Mrs. Black might have planted back 150 years ago, and they would have produced fruit. The ones that have been planted here in Cherryville probably in the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years have been the flowering. And this particular species is the Kwanzan. Okay, they grow eventually up to about 20 to 25 feet high. They have huge fluffy pink blossoms to them, so they make quite a statement versus there are varieties that are more white. We sort of personally like the pink, the color of the pink. They're fairly easy to maintain. I mean, one thing that we did learn through this process is that once you plant them, you do need once a year to sort of go around, trim up the base of the trees, give them some fertilizer, and then just check them for any kind of disease that might have, or bug that might have infiltrated. It's not expected that happens, but it's possible in certain environments. But there are a group of us that are committed to go around, to start an annual or a biannual effort to look them over and make sure that they're watered, mulched, and taken care of. Now, we do hope that the city may be able to allot some budget money just for those supplies, because I think people will donate the effort, but we might need a little help with the supplies of mulch, that kind of thing.
And how can the community rally behind these efforts and kind of assist you guys?
Yeah, so listen, we are just a bunch of people that got together informally, and you all, anybody out there can step up and work with us. The best way to do it is to contact me or contact Brian Dalton with the city. He knows of what our plans are. The other part of this was too that we do see in the future, maybe this next year, that we would open this up and promote everyone buying a small cherry tree for their yard in town. Okay, and it'll be at maybe a reduced cost. We'll see. Things are expensive these days, but I think it would be a great thing to try to engage the community that way, that, hey, we have a cherry tree in our yard, and really, once again, contribute to that, what do we call it, the Jefferson Memorial of the South. I think it'd be a great thing to see.
I just can't wait for springtime. That's all I keep thinking is walking down these streets and seeing all of these beautiful trees in blossom. Thank you so much for your efforts. And do you have anything else you'd like to add about the project, about the history, about what these beautiful symbols mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure that people know this is not just me, there are a lot of people behind me, and that it's a community. It's what Cherryville was always known for when I lived here, and I think still today. We rally around a good, positive project, community effort, and we make it happen. And I just hope that people will also appreciate it and want to step up and join us.